Okay, great. So I'll give it maybe another minute for a few more people to trickle in. And all right, we'll give it another minute, I think. People are still sort of coming in. All right, I think we can just get started. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so glad that you decided to spend part of your evening with us, and it's our intention to make the next hour a really valuable time for you. My name is Jocelyn Suhaimi, and I'm a transportation analyst with Kittleson in the Southern California office. I joined Kittleson in July of 2020 after earning my bachelor's degree in civil engineering from UCLA, and I will be moderating tonight's webinar and Q&A. Our speakers today are Grace Carsky, a transportation analyst in the Oakland office, Amanua Osafo, an analyst in the Orlando office, and Esteban Doyle, a planner in the Philadelphia office. Grace, Amanua, and Esteban will each tell you a little bit more about their journeys to Kittleson a bit later on. But I'll start off with a few logistics. This is the last of a four-part series that we're offering in our Conversations with Kittleson. The series is meant to be exactly that, an open conversation with transportation professionals who are in your shoes maybe 1 year ago or 20 years ago, but who can look back on their experiences, share with you what they've learned, and most importantly, see what questions you have as you evaluate your career options. The recordings for our series are up on the website, and I'll be sharing that link in the chat shortly. Our past events have been about careers in transportation and Kittleson's culture and values, our internship program, and our market service areas and some project examples. If you want to learn more about Kittleson, why we do what we do, and how we work on projects, I highly encourage you to check those out. So today, each of our presenters is going to talk a little bit about their journey into transportation and how they ended up at Kittleson, what their typical work days and work weeks look like. And then we'll go into Q&A. The introductions will be pretty short because it's our intention to make as much time for Q&A as possible. We've gotten some great questions already through the RSVP form, and we're excited to dive into those. And I also welcome and encourage you to use the chat box in your GoToWebinar panel to post questions throughout the presentations, and we will get to as many of those as we possibly can. I will now hand it over to Grace to kick us off.
Thanks, Joss. I'll just check real quick. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So hi everyone. As Joss introduced, I'm Grace Carsky. I'm a transportation analyst out of our Oakland office. I've been with Kittleson for a little over 2.5 years now. My path into Kittleson is pretty different from most people and different from what you're going to hear later. Um, I don't have any background in civil engineering or planning. I actually went to school and got my bachelor's and master's in forestry. Um, and so getting to Kittleson, while I was searching for jobs after grad school, my savings account was rapidly depleting and I needed to pick something up to tie me over before setting off into my career. And I wound up picking up a temporary admin job just while I was searching for a new job. That front desk position happened to be with Kittleson in their Portland office. Um, when I started there, my resume was passed around, and so others in the office were able to see that I had experience with ArcGIS, with RStudio, a bit of Excel work. And since front desk tasks were not taking up my full 8-hour days, I offered to help out with other project work that they might have and need assistance on. So really basic like data management and mapping tasks. I wound up helping out with a couple things like editing crash data for safety projects, help set up some roadway data in GIS for a transportation systems plan, and then a couple maps for reports here and there. And so that temporary admin job actually turned into a full-time offer to become a GIS analyst with Kittleson. Um, and when presented with the offer, it was definitely scary to make that career switch, especially considering that my career in forestry hadn't even begun. Um, and so when I think back on it, I ultimately had two reasons why I chose to stay with Kittleson. Um, the first being that I had so much fun just learning about transportation. It's something that had always interested me, but I never knew it could be a career of mine. And so as a kid, I loved looking at maps and I loved taking public transportation. To this day, taking the bus is still my favorite way to get around a city, especially if I'm traveling and going to new places. The first thing I want to do is check out their public transit system. Um, and just growing up in a somewhat urban setting, I had a lot of questions when I'd wait at a signal and wonder why the red light lasted so long or why the left turn light didn't turn green when I was trying to make that turn, or why transit stops were placed really close at some intersections, but then the next one was half a mile away or something. So it was really fun to be able to get into these projects, and all these random questions I had were slowly being answered over time. Um, Second, I absolutely loved the people I was working with. From day one, everyone was super kind and super helpful. And part of me questioned like why that was, because I was only supposed to be there temporarily, and it just really stuck out how friendly everybody was. I was also super taken aback by how much trust people placed in me to help out with their projects. Because again, I came in with no engineering or planning experience, and I was just thinking, are you sure you want me to be doing this? But then it goes back to just how helpful everybody was and how people would check in on me and make sure that I, understood the assignment and that if I had any questions, they were there to help me through those. Um, and so when it came to taking this full-time offer, I I knew that when I was going to get a job and start my career, that who I worked with was going to be just as important as the work that I was doing, and that I needed to enjoy both of those things. Um, and even in my short time in my temporary position, I knew that I just wasn't going to find better coworkers than I did at Kittleson. Um, and so I took the offer, obviously, because I'm here talking with you all today. Um, since that initial offer as a GIS analyst, I've transitioned to being a transportation analyst. My curiosity definitely got the best of me, and I kept asking more and more questions and wanting to do more and more work. And so I made that lateral move. Um, and I've also moved down to the Oakland office. And in the last year and a half, since doing both those things. A lot of my project work revolves around safety and active transportation planning, but I've also been able to dive a bit into some intersection operations work and some travel demand modeling. So both very new things as well, but I'm having so much fun learning them and continuing to learn other things as well. So yeah, that's a quick intro on my background. Super excited to be here, really excited to dive into some of these questions.
Thanks, Grace. We do get a lot of questions about whether you have to be an engineer or a planner to join us at Kittleson, so I'm really glad that you could share your story. And now I'd like to hand it off to Amanua to share hers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanua Osafo. Well, a quick story about my name. My full name is actually Amanua Osafo. So if you want to look me up, you'll find before that. I'm a transportation analyst in our Orlando office. I joined in January 2020, right before the pandemic started. So I did my undergrad in Ghana, where I'm from, and I decided to get a master's degree. Initially, I was thinking of getting a master's degree in systems engineering or industrial engineering because I like to optimize systems. That wasn't working out too well, so I went back to the drawing board and thought of all that I had learned in school and what systems I could optimize. And that's when transportation came in. So I ended up going to LSU to get a master's degree in civil engineering, focusing on transportation engineering. And I did that for a year, and then I transferred schools to ULL, University of Louisiana Lafayette. But during my master's, the entirety of my master's, I was working with the research arm of Louisiana Department of Transportation. It's called LTRC, Louisiana Transportation Research Center. And that was my first introduction to transportation work in the US because it's a little bit different from, the systems are just a little bit different, back in Ghana. So that was, I learned a lot of things while I was at LTRC, and the coursework was definitely helpful. I was also the ITE meeting coordinator, and during that time, one of our employees came over to talk about Kittleson, so that's how I was introduced to Kittleson. And when I was about to graduate, I decided to reach out and learn more about Kittleson. And what I really liked is that Kittleson has a flat structure, and you can do whatever you want to. Like you can, for example, now I work on so many different projects at a time, and you can essentially chart your own path. And that drew me to Kittleson. Also, everyone that I spoke to was very, very welcoming. We have a long interview process that allows you to meet so many people before you actually start working. So I thought that was nice. So I started working in January 2020, and currently I have been working mainly on traffic operations projects in the Florida region, but I also work sometimes with other folks in California. I've worked on a project with Grace before. I also work in some Northeast, some of the offices in our Northeast region. So that has also been exciting. So I'm excited to be here and to answer some of the questions that you may have.
Thanks for sharing, Amanua. Last but not least, we have Esteban.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Esteban Doyle. I'm a planner in our Philadelphia office. I've been with Kittleson for similar to Grace about 2.5 years. My interest in transportation, I think, really began back when I was growing up. I grew up in a fairly small sized city in upstate New York, and I remember multiple times, having moments where we didn't have access to a car, and how that really created barriers to getting around and accomplishing very basic tasks like grocery shopping, going to school, my mom getting to her job. And I think that was the first moment where I really saw transportation as a system that can really either, if it works well, it really provides a lot of benefit to you. And if it doesn't, you run into that barrier for any reason whatsoever, it can have really devastating impacts on your life from an economic, a social aspect. And that was always something that didn't really sit right with me, that this system had so many inequities in it. Flash forward to going to undergrad, I went to Northwestern. I didn't know what I was going to study at first. I came in undecided. Then eventually I was like, well, I like math. I like science, kind of. So I guess I'll be an engineer. What else is there to do, right? And then eventually I settled on civil engineering. And it wasn't until somewhere around my junior year, I was taking our mandatory transportation engineering class, and alongside it, I was taking an elective in the sociology department that was an intro to urban sociology, basically the study of cities. And at that moment, taking these classes side by side, I kind of had my aha moment. In one class, we were talking, in the engineering class, we were talking about designing roadways, bike lanes, pedestrian facilities, transit. And in the other class, we were talking about how highways really destroyed our cities and the discrimination in history of redlining and all the supposed new growth of cities in that really just kind of decimated communities. And for me, that was this moment where I decided this is something that I want to do. This is something that I want to work on. I want to be able to sort of link together both like a planning and an engineering background to focus on fixing our transportation system, making it work for everyone. I see transportation as, how do we bring access to people? How do we help people get to do the things that they want to do? Um, so that's really what I decided that I wanted to do. And then when it came, as I was getting ready to graduate, I realized I didn't really have the formal background. At least I didn't feel like I had the formal knowledge enough to be an effective transportation planner. And I started to look into grad school, and I decided to go to UCLA to get my master's in urban and regional planning with a focus in transportation policy and planning. While I was there, I also got to intern at LA Metro in their van pool team. And so I learned a lot during those 2 years of that master's program, all about the transportation and history that, being an engineering student, I didn't get a lot of in my coursework. And then as I was getting ready to actually start looking for jobs, I looked at Kittleson. I had actually heard of Kittleson when I was in undergrad. Someone had come to Northwestern to give a presentation that I attended, and I really loved Kittleson's approach to transportation planning. That they didn't really silo people off into, you're either, a traffic engineer or you're a bike planner, and that's it. They really had people of all different backgrounds and disciplines working on a huge variety of projects. And as someone who just like was really into transportation but didn't really have a focus, and I had this weird background of, yes, I'm an engineer, but I also have a planning degree, and I didn't know like what side of that spectrum I really wanted to focus on just yet. That really drew me to apply at Kittleson, where I thought that the environment would work best to really allow me to try out all sorts of different projects and to get to really develop my skills and as both a transportation engineer and a planner. But in the 2.5 years I've been at Kittleson, I've been able to do just that. I've worked on a whole variety of projects, from very traditional planning studies to traffic operations to design, and all the while learning new skills, getting to work in a whole host of different geographical settings. I've been able to have worked on a project in all 4 of our regions so far, and I think it has just made me a well-rounded transportation practitioner. And so that has been really, my journey through transportation and into Kittleson up until now.
Great, thanks, Esteban. Fun fact, Esteban and I actually did attend UCLA at the same time. He was doing his master's while I was doing my bachelor's degree. And yeah, so I think now that we have some insight into our 3 panelists' various journeys to transportation and to Kittleson, I would like to open it up to Q&A. So again, you can submit questions through the question box on GoToWebinar, and I think we can just get started. So the first question is, what does a typical work week look like for you? And I think we could start with Amanua and then maybe go to Esteban and then Grace.
Yeah, thanks, Joss. A typical work week. Well, Monday always starts with me filling out, like submitting my timesheet for the previous week and planning ahead for what's going to happen, during the week. Well, I'll fill out the timesheets on the Friday before, but that's just the system anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I always do that and then plan out what I'm supposed to do. Look out for, think about the meetings that I'll be having during the week, and I plan out what I'll be working on that day. I find it hard to plan past 3 days because things come up. So yeah, and then I just start working. And since I started working, well, I only worked eight weeks in the office, and so most of my experience has been during the pandemic. So it's usually another project team member calling in to discuss something, or having a weekly check-in meeting on one of the projects that I work on. Usually I work on about 4 to 5 projects every week, and some of them have weekly check-in meetings, so that's something that I look forward to or have to prepare for that week. Also, there's always, in the Florida region, we have what we call the huddles, where we meet and discuss our workloads. My huddle is called the Honey Jam and Mayo huddle. The Mayo agenda is for, we talk about workload and all the other boring stuff. Honey agenda is when we talk about news articles, someone does a project showcase. And then the Jam agenda, we just talk about life and anything non-work related. So that's also something I look forward to every Friday. Yeah, that's how I would say that's how a basic work week looks like for me. Just meetings and project work, and then the huddle that we have.
Right, yeah, I can go next. Yeah, pretty similar, pretty similar schedule. In the Northeast, we do something similar to the huddles, though we call them pods, because every region has to have their own unique spin on it. Those are usually on Monday mornings, and it's a group of, I would say, anywhere between maybe 5 to 8 staff members. All across all different staff levels, so some entry staff all the way to very more senior staff members. They're semi structured around common interest or common work type. It's very loosely because, again, so many people at Kittleson really work across the spectrum of project types, so it's kind of hard to group, like, okay, here's all like the definitive planners, because everyone does a little bit of everything. But they're slightly structured around similar work types, and it's really this discussion in the morning to kind of talk through, what does the week look like ahead? Are you feeling overloaded? Do you maybe have a little too much on your plate? And it's a great chance to reach out to someone else in your pod and be like, hey, I'm feeling a little stressed this week. Is there any chance that maybe we can, shift some stuff around and maybe share this work a little bit? Or if you're even feeling a little light, and maybe you can help take on some work from someone else's plate. And we also, if time permitting, we do also, try to have broader discussions about the firm, about the transportation planning as well. Sometimes people bring in articles and stuff like that. So that's usually like my Monday mornings. And then Mondays, I feel like, are always the big meeting day. Every project that has a weekly check-in, it's either like a Monday or a Tuesday, which is, I like meetings personally because I feel like it makes the day go by faster, but maybe I'm alone in that. And then yeah, throughout the week, working on anytime, anywhere, I would say between 4 to 6 projects. I typically would spend, depending on the level of effort, some projects I'm more involved in than others, but some projects I could be working on, about 4 hours in a given week. Some might be up to 8 or 12 hours. depending on the scale of effort or how involved I am and the type of work that it is. And then beyond project work, there's a whole host of other activities that I'm involved in. I'm involved in Kittleson's employee resource groups, which are a set of identity-based groups within Kittleson where staff members who share that identity get to meet together. I would say usually about once a month. Some groups might meet a little bit more or a little less, and basically kind of talk through their experiences, be able to build and connect, and also talk about different ways to sort of make improvements or recommendations to Kittleson overall. So I'm involved in the LGBTQ plus ERG and we meet roughly about monthly for our sort of general meeting, but we also have every now and again little coffee breaks where we like to join together and just kind of talk about whatever's on our minds. We're affectionately known as Rainbow Road, bringing together the transportation and rainbows. So that's something that I always look forward to as a non-project work stuff that, kind of breaks up the day.
Yeah, so like Amanua and Esteban, my week looks very similar. I'll take it a small step back in that Kittleson's really flexible with the work week and the schedules, and that I think includes what time you start. Especially virtually, it seems like everyone has kind of figured out their own start time, and so I start early. I wake up at 6:30 every morning. I'd wake up earlier if I could. Usually start work around 7:30. And very similarly, like the first thing I do is I look at my calendar and just see what do I have that day? What do I have this week? I'm a micromanager of myself, so my calendar is like color coded based on my internal meetings versus my external client meetings. It's based on project meetings versus like admin things. So like Esteban, I'm also in the Rainbow Road ERG, and I've got that color coded different from the client project meeting I have that same day. It helps me just in like a very quick look. I can see how many meetings I have and also the ones that I know I'm going to need to put more focus on. So with client meetings, that's just a little extra, like need to be mentally there. Internal check-ins depending on the project. Sometimes they're projects that I'm helping lead, or we're at a part in the project where I know that I need to be giving a pretty significant update on where we're at. Other times it's a project that maybe I'm learning something, and so I might not have as big of a speaking role, but then the listening is very important because I know I'm learning something new. Other types of meetings that we have our monthly all staff. That's something that the whole firm joins together, and our CEO Brandon leads that. That's usually just an hour once a month. And then since we started virtually, we also, when appropriate, have done bi-weekly all staff meetings, and these are just a shorter 30-minute kind of firm-wide check-in, usually with the agenda where we're talking about either current events or current happenings in the firm, but still a good way to just get an update, pulse check on the firm, and again, check in with each other and see what everybody's doing. So yeah, I'll stop there. That's essentially my week. Looks very similar to what everyone else has said, plus some.
Yeah, I feel like every week at Kittleson is just a huge mishmash of lots of different things that we all get involved in. Sometimes they'll throw in an interview for us, with a new candidate.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't forget that. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So the next question is coming in from the live chat, and it's how much autonomy do you have in choosing which projects you want to work on? And I think any of you can jump in on this.
I can start with that. I would say you have quite a bit of autonomy, to the point where it can actually almost be a little overwhelming at first, where, Kittleson, I think, as a benefit of our, really, our flat structure, we don't have a very traditional, you don't really come in with like a supervisor and like a very hierarchical setup. We really want staff who come in to sort of make their own journey and really explore and do the work that, is meaningful to them. So there are a lot of opportunities, when you come in to really, you know, set your schedule based around the stuff that you're interested in, and reach out to people. We encourage staff to, as you first start, to just message people and set up, just like a meet and greet. Be like, hey, you're working on this, that sounds really cool, can I learn about that? And maybe you aren't there, maybe there isn't an opportunity for you to work on that specific project, but that person may, remember you and be like, oh, Esteban said that he's interested in doing transit planning. There's this new project that might be coming up in a couple months. I'll see if he's interested in that and put it on his calendar. So that's one way to kind of get started. I will say, when you very first come and get onboarded in the firm, we recognize that can be a little overwhelming, and we don't want anyone to be like stressed out, be like, I have to fill out my whole 40 hours a week. So your onboarding staff, which are usually 2 to 3 senior mentors who are usually in your office, or at least people who are going to be working with you quite a bit at the very beginning, will kind of set you up on a bunch of projects that they think that will fit well, based on your interviews, and we'll have a good sense of like what your interests are, and from that we try to set every new person who comes on, at least get them started in 4 to 5 projects that we think would be a good fit. And then as those projects kind of get going and you get more comfortable, in the firm, you meet more people, you just get more comfortable with all the different connections. You start building that ability to kind of find your work very easily. And then you'll find that people start coming to you with a lot of projects, and then you might even have that opportunity where you can be selective, because you'll have a bunch of people asking you to do things, but you only have 40 hours in a week, so you have to be you get the benefit of getting to be a little bit selective of what you devote your time to.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and kind of just use myself as an example. Even when I first started, a lot of the like when I started the full-time job, a lot of the work I was doing was very heavily GIS based. That was something that I had experience in. It was something I was comfortable with. And in a way, it was a good fallback, because I was still learning the context and like the transportation world and all the different phrases that I'm still learning today. So having that technical background and then that technical foundation of a project was a really easy way for me to be successful in my projects. And then, yeah, as I've continued on at Kittleson and kind of grown in my role, it has flipped a bit. Now it's project managers coming to me and asking or telling me sometimes like, oh, we put you on this proposal, you're going to be on this safety project. So, which is always good. It's nice to not have to worry about work. But at the same time, it also, with that growth and that comfort increasing, I've been more confident to step out of the box and say, I've never worked on a project like this. I still know nothing about it, but I'd like to give it a shot. And everyone at Kittleson's very receptive to that. And I don't think I've ever had somebody tell me, no, you can't do that because you don't have the experience in it.
Yeah, I agree. My experience has been very similar. So I started off doing a lot of traffic operation projects in the Florida region. And just like everyone else, it was a learning curve. And so it was good to have a solid, like 30 hours of just traffic operations, and then fill in with like quick bend tasks. But as time went on, I have been able to step out and like ask for just random projects that I find interesting in different places. So yeah, Kittleson does very well with allowing you to choose what projects you want to work on. The only limitation would be if we don't have clients requesting for the type of service that you want to work on. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Great, fantastic. All right, the next question is from the RSVP form, and it is, how has COVID changed the workplace? How has Kittleson kind of handled working from home?
I'll kick it off. I'll start by saying that because we have so many offices spread over the US, the transition from working in person to working at home, I think I can speak for pretty much all of Kittleson when I say it was a very easy transition. Because we are a flat structure, because we work on projects outside of our region and our offices, being on video calls with coworkers is just a daily occurrence for most people. And so having to do that just from the comfort of my living room wasn't much different, except that maybe I was wearing sweatpants instead of real pants. But other than that, I think it was a pretty easy transition in terms of keeping that communication with my coworkers. Easy in that I didn't feel like I was losing grasp on my projects, like things were still running pretty well. I think transportation's one industry that, you know, didn't suffer too much during the pandemic. I know harder to get some count data, but other than that, you know, our projects were still pushing along. Our clients were still asking for deliverables and wanting to move things forward. So at least on that front, it wasn't as big of a shock, I think, at Kittleson that as it was for a lot of other people in the world.
Yeah, I can add on to that. I agree that it was relatively easy in that adjustment. I think, because we had, gotten so used to relying on Teams, doing a lot of remote work remotely anyway, working across offices a lot in the pre-pandemic era. And especially, in the Philadelphia office, we're one of the smaller offices. So there had been times where I had worked from home just randomly beforehand anyway. So I think that that was a little bit easy. I think, some of the challenges, definitely I do miss that camaraderie of working in the office, getting to see everyone, going out to some of the local establishments nearby. We had a Sweet Green right next to our office that I think we ordered for every every Philly office meeting. We just kept getting our Sweet Green. But yeah, so I definitely have had missed some of that, but I've also really have enjoyed the flexibility that working from home has provided. I ended up actually moving out of Philadelphia for personal reasons, and I was still able to work with Kittleson, and they've been very accommodating for me in that transition, which I've been really appreciative of.
I cut out. Did Grace already go?
I did.
Yeah. So I started right before the pandemic, and I was very excited to, work in an office full of 30 people because I get my energy off working with people. And it was great. The 8 weeks that I worked in the office before the pandemic hit. One time we went to an Orlando Magic game. We were playing the Boston Celtics, and our office got a whole suite by ourselves, and it was fun. Life was good. That's what I was looking for. I was like, this is why I decided to work here. And then the pandemic hit, and one of the things that we used to do was to have virtual coffee breaks. There was one at 10:30, and then there was another one at 3:20, where people could just hop on. So that worked for a whole year until we all got fatigued with the screen. So we no longer do that. But and this is my first job outside of school, so I think that I have just, I really don't have a lot of pre-pandemic experience, but this has been great so far. I wanted to be in the office 24/7. I was like one of those people, but I think that the pandemic has modified my behavior, and I kind of work I'm productive at home as well. And so, yeah, I'm looking into working doing a hybrid. So that's what I have to say.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm class of 2020. My entire career has been virtual, and I don't know what it's like to work in an office pretty much at all. but it's been fine. So kind of a related question. How do you get to know other entry-level staff outside of project work if you're not always in the office?
I can start off on this as well. When I started, we have an SL1 staff level 1 group. I think it's an SL1 and SL2 group, and we started with this small groups. We did a rotation of groups of 4 people where we'd meet once a month for 3 months and get to know each other. So, and it's with people from all over the different regions in Kittleson. So I remember the first one I had participants from all the regions, and then the second one, well, we didn't have everybody, but it was also a different mix. So that has been good, and I think we've also had some other SL1 summits where we've been able to connect with other SL1s on a not project level.
Yeah, we did something similar. Well, all the SL1s had the SL1 across the firm meetings. I know in the West region, the SL1s, SL2s. So when we say SL1, that just stands for staff level. For anyone who's like confused by this terminology, 1 being analyst, 2 being planner engineer, and then it just goes up with seniority. So essentially the kind of in the West region, the entry-ish level staff would meet bi-weekly to talk about workload, but it also became a time for us to just connect with each other in a way. And so, and I've done this with other project meetings too, where I do try and take the first 5 or last 5 minutes to just check in like on a personal basis and ask my coworkers like how their weekend went or what they're up to later that day. And that way you can still kind of build that rapport and those connections without it purely being like billable project meeting work. So just, yeah, another little thing that I did throughout the last 18 months.
Yeah, I would echo that. In the Northeast, we had something similar, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. We started, it was called like the Northeast Analyst in Quarantine group. We started like a little chat, and we met on a semi-regular basis, like as kind of like a casual lunch break time, to sort of eat a virtual lunch together. In the pre-pandemic times, we had met up sometimes. Our region had at least once a year an in-person meeting where all the offices came together, converged in our Baltimore office for a like a half-day long meeting. And in the past, the one year I got to attend before everything went virtual, we all the other SL1s at the time, we all met together and we had like a little brunch together on the day after the meeting. So there had been times where we've gotten to be able to be together in person, but still, even if that has been challenging at times, we're still trying to take advantage of the virtual environment and work with what we can to still build those connections, because those are really important. And building, these are people that presumably we're going to be working with for a very long time in our careers as we continue at Kittleson, and making sure we have those connections is really important to a good, fun work environment.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, so our next question is, what kind of training opportunities are there for skills or software that you have less experience with? Esteban, you want to start?
Oh.
Or Grace? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure, because I'm talking. I would say project work is like the easiest, most linear way to do it, I'd say. Again, kind of going back to the autonomy over choosing your projects, like you don't have to have the experience to work on those projects. You just need to be upfront that you don't have the experience and you'd like to gain it. And project managers are very susceptible to letting you do just that. And so there's definitely been projects where I go into it and I say, oh, we need to use Synchro for this. I've never opened Synchro in my life. How do I go about this? And so, and then I just sit with a project manager, or I sit with other team members on the project. You know, we do a share screen. They walk me through how the software works, why we do what we do for the analysis. So you almost get a little like in-house training session that way. I'll throw it out if anyone wants to add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to say that's the easiest way of learning new softwares. And sometimes it's also dependent on the type of project you're working on. There's some projects that, you know, the client is asking for a deliverable in 2 weeks. In such a case, you know, there's not enough time or maybe budgets to have you learn on the job. But there are many other projects where there's a lot of flexibility in the schedule to allow for you to learn on the job. And I'm
Uh-oh.
Did we lose her?
very little skill set in most of. I started with very of the traffic and 11 months. Yeah. So like Grace said, it's you have the opportunity to learn on the job. Oh, and one more thing, that sometimes there are opportunities to have some trainings. You know, you can, if you think there's a specific skill sets that you need. I know that Kittleson has a subscription with LinkedIn where you can learn certain specific softwares that you need. We also have some training on different softwares on our intranet, so you can go in there and yeah, learn as well.
Yeah, I'll echo all that. Definitely the project work is the best way. I always joke with people, I came in, despite being, you know, an engineer, I did not know CAD. I didn't know any like Adobe. I didn't know Synchro. I knew GIS, and now, but you know, I took one class in grad school. I was by no means a GIS expert, and I'm still not an expert in any of that. But I definitely feel, you know, in that time and working on projects, like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing more or less now, just do that repetition. The one thing I would also add is, you know, sometimes Kittleson hosts internal presentations. We call them our Kittleson University. Usually a more senior member or someone who is sort of an expert in either a software or like a topic area will do like an hour long, usually around like lunchtime, just a presentation on, you know, what that is. And that's always been, you know, a really great opportunity to kind of just like hear and do and learn a little bit about what people are working on. And then even if you might not be able to like learn a lot from that, just that one session, you know, okay, this person's an expert on this, so now I'm going to ping them and bother them if ever I have any questions.
Great, all great answers. I think the only thing that I would add is that Kittleson also does encourage staff members to attend conferences, and those conferences also often have training sessions and things like that. But otherwise, yeah, all great answers. Switching gears a little bit, I think we got a question about applications and the interview process. So could each of you maybe talk a little bit about interviewing with Kittleson and what that process was like? Because I know we have a bit of a lengthy process, and I think people probably want to know about it. Amanua, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So I reached out to one of our staff that had come to LSU, you know, to talk about Kittleson, and then he encouraged me to apply online. And so there's the application, and then we have a set of questions that you have to answer, like an essay, an essay type thing. And so I answered the essay, and I wrote the essay and then I applied. And after that, it was screened, and I was invited for a tier 1 interview. So well, so it's 3 steps. I took 3 steps, and the first one was a tier 1 interview where it was virtual at the time. It was a 75-minute conversation with 3 staff, and we just got to know each other. They asked about what I was interested in, and I asked questions about the firm as well. And then they scheduled another one. Oh, wait, so after that, I sent in a reflection of the conversation that we had. And that is something that after every interview I did, to send in a reflection, or the request that you send a reflection. And so I did a second interview, which was a tier 2 interview with 3 other staff again, and got to know them some more. I think at that point, that's when we spoke about my technical skills and stuff like that. It was more technical than the first one. And then I was invited for a tier 3. And for that, I had to choose where I wanted to interview, which office I wanted to interview at. And like I mentioned earlier, I like to work with lots of people, and the Florida region has our second largest office. And also I prefer the weather in Florida to Portland, which is which is the largest office we have. And so I chose to interview in the Orlando office. And the tier 3 interview was a day-long interview. So started at 9 a.m., had conversations with different staff members. There were some senior level staff, and then I had to talk with some junior level staff as well. And then at lunchtime, I made a presentation. I did a presentation to the entire firm. It wasn't just to the office that I was in Orlando, but it was to everyone in the firm had the chance to tune in, but I was physically presenting at the Orlando office. So after that, we had a few conversations with I think the HR and just a few other people. And at 5 p.m. when the day was over, I went for dinner with the office because they were happy that I was there. And then I was given an offer, and here I am. Oh, and the whole process took about maybe 2 months from the day I wrote the first, sent in the application. But it really, the schedule is dictated by you, honestly. You could say, if you're available, you could have it as fast as you can, but it's usually drawn out.
Yeah, I was about to say, 2 months. I'm jealous. Mine definitely. I think I had submitted my application around December, and I think I had my offer in May. I don't know. So that was quite long, but I also at the time I wasn't like really in a rush or anything. I was I had sort of sending feelers out about like what exactly worked for me. But yeah, very similar process. The 3 separate tiers. Mine were in person because this was back before the pandemic. But yeah, one thing that it's a very common thing in our interviews is you meet a lot of people. And it will be both people who would be in a similar entry-level staff to very, very senior people in the firm. And I kind of like that because, you get to meet, everyone's going to have very different types of questions. They're going to be interested in you in different aspects about you as a worker. And it's also an opportunity for you to really get a sense of, are these the people that I want to work with? I think our interview process is really just as much about us getting to know about you as you learning about Kittleson. And, and I really encourage that, as you go through, especially in those early stages, to, ask a lot of questions to really get a sense of, is this a firm that, that's going to work with my work style and, where I want to be and where I think I can thrive, because, that's really important for, you can find great opportunities at a lot of places, but what's going to be best for you is, are you happy working with the people that you're with? And do you feel that you're in an environment that supports you? And I hope that will be, you'll find that Kittleson checks all those boxes, but, we want to make sure that you're finding that out in that interview process.
Yeah, so I didn't go through the interview process at Kittleson, but as somebody who's interviewed quite a number of people to come to Kittleson, I think, Esteban, you brought up two really good points. Like, one, to definitely, do your research. It always looks good, through our website, but again, through like the conversations you have with people, and they don't need to be these super impressive questions about like, what is the future of transportation going to look like? It can be, what is the flexibility of the hours in the office? What kind of projects would I be working on if I were to start in a month? Things, ask questions within your comfort level. I'll also just bring up kind of with the length of the application process. If you know you're going to graduate within the year and you are looking for a job after graduation, it's completely acceptable to apply then. I know one thing that I was told when I was going through grad school was to not apply to jobs until I was about 2 months out to graduation, and that totally bit me in the butt because then I was like scrambling to find something. Obviously it worked out well for me, but you don't want to find yourself in the position of not being employed after you graduate school. And so maybe that doesn't look like a formal application to Kittleson, but maybe it looks like reaching out to someone via LinkedIn and getting an informational interview. Totally acceptable. We've all either done it ourselves or we've conducted one with somebody else. And then again, that just feeds into like you doing your research and coming back to us with really good questions that can start that interview process.
Yeah. For me, I think I expressed interest. I expressed interest in September after my internship. Like right when my internship ended, I just submitted the application because I was like, I don't know if I want to work for anyone else. And then I had an offer in hand by like November. So yeah, but my process was a little unique because I was a former intern and I went through the lengthy interview process for my internship, and then the process for full time was a little bit easier. Okay, so one more question about hiring. Amanua mentioned making a presentation in her final process. What do you have to present on? Is it a research or a project assigned to applicants? Esteban, do you want to talk about the tier 3 presentation a little bit? I think we might have passed.
The presentation is really up to you. I think a lot of people tend to do a project that they have worked on very closely. For me, I was a master's student, so I presented on my capstone project that was part of my master's program. I've seen a lot of students who are maybe finishing their undergrad do their, senior thesis. People choose to present on an internship that they've worked on, but people have also presented more broadly on, I've seen some presentations on people who did like a study abroad and they maybe took a really interesting class on transportation. They're like, here are the 5 things I learned while I was studying in Denmark, or here is a really cool trip that I took and we, did some work on this interesting thing of transportation. I think the presentation is really more for us, again, to kind of get to know a little bit about your personality, what are your interests. I think it's more important that your passion and your love of transportation comes through in the presentation, whether or not, it's not like we're going to be judging on your technical skills or, did you do the most thorough analysis? Although people will ask a lot of interesting, probing questions on, the work that you did in the process. But again, I think what we're more interested in is your passion for transportation, how you think, and how you approach problem solving. So again, really, don't get so worried about, is this the best project to use, but more, is it something that you feel like you did a lot of work on, you had a lot of passion for, and that really showcases your skill set and who you are as a person.
Yeah, again, didn't do it, but I'll just say that from watching them, the ones that I've always been most impressed with are from the people who chose a topic that they were passionate about and comfortable speaking about. So yeah, you don't need to talk about something highly technical if you can't like answer the questions that are coming after it. You know, talk about that study abroad semester if that's what brings you joy.
Great. Okay, so we are just about at the top of the hour. I think I'm going to ask one more question. Yeah, I think I'm going to ask one more question before we wrap up. And the question is, what was your biggest challenge when first starting off at Kittleson?
I have an answer. I can go first.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
My biggest challenge was definitely with me and my imposter syndrome and nothing that Kittleson did to me. And that is coming in and knowing that I pretty much knew nothing and being embarrassed by it, even though I had no reason to be embarrassed. I was an entry level analyst. I had no reason to, or no one, I shouldn't have expected it for myself, and no one should expect it from me that I would have 20 years of knowledge as somebody who has worked 20 minutes at a job. But the imposter syndrome is real, and it is something that in the beginning I could see was holding me back a little bit. I definitely was a little hesitant to ask certain questions just from fear of looking like I didn't know what I was doing and that I didn't deserve to be there. But it was something that I told myself I quickly needed to get over. And then I also had, you know, incredible coworkers that were helping me out as well. So a fear that I shouldn't have had, but it was there. And so, and I know that's something that a lot of entry level, just new employees kind of deal with, where they kind of need to learn to find that balance of like, what's asking for too much help, and where, you know, and where's like the independence of finding it out yourself. But everyone gets there eventually.
Yeah, I would say that I had a very similar challenge. I just thought I needed to know it all and get it right the first time, and that placed an enormous pressure on myself that, you know, wasn't necessary. And yeah, it's definitely, you get over it with time, but that was my biggest challenge. The other challenge is no fault of Kittleson's. It's just, you know, the pandemic hit, so there was a very hard time last year. But yeah, those were my two challenges. Like thinking that I needed to know everything and get it right the first time in the middle of a pandemic wasn't a great combination.
I would say for me, I think I struggled at the beginning of making those connections across the firm. I think I mentioned that when I started at the Philadelphia office, it's a quite small office. When I joined, I was the third person in the office, and while I, you know, immediately bonded with the other two people quite well, I kind of felt kind of a little detached from the other offices. You know, I would see people in Teams meetings and check-ins, and but I didn't feel like I like knew them very well. And I also tend to, you know, I'm a little bit more of an introvert myself. So, you know, people are saying, oh, you know, set up all these like meet and greets and just reach out to people and get to know them. And when people tell that to me, I'm like, no, I don't know if I can do that. But you know, over time, I found that, you know, the more extroverted people, they just reached out to me. So that was great. That's a win-win for everyone. And uh, uh, as time went on, and like different projects I worked on, and I did get to do, fortunately, was fortunate enough to actually do a couple office visits prior to the pandemic. I spent a week in our Boston office, spent a couple days in our DC, and then in our Baltimore office, and actually met people in person and started to bond. I really started to feel that connected to the broader, you know, Kittleson firm, and just getting involved in, you know, non-project activities. and being willing to, say yes when people ask me to join things, I have found that I have been able to build those more personal connections with people outside of just like a pure work environment. And that just made me feel a little bit more comfortable at the firm and with the people I'm working with.
Fantastic. Yeah, I definitely resonate a lot with all of that, especially with the imposter syndrome, because I think, like, as a brand new staff member, like, you really, really want to prove yourself. You really, really want to prove that you deserve to be here. But I do want to say our interview process is very lengthy. So if you got through it, you deserve to be here. And the only things that we really expect from entry-level staff members is that you love transportation and that you're willing to learn and learn quickly. So I think that's something that now that I've sort of been here for around a little over a year, and that now I'm kind of helping mentor and onboard new staff, is to kind of remind them that, like, it's okay to feel like you don't know anything, because you're always going to feel like you don't know anything, and you realize that everyone else also feels like they don't know anything, and we're all just kind of trying to help each other out as much as possible. And Kittleson has a pretty strong culture of like mentorship and coaching. You're given an onboarding team when you start. That onboarding team eventually transitions into a coach or someone that you'll work closely with on your career development, project management skills, whatever you're interested in. And all of that has created, I think, for me at least, a really supportive culture where I feel empowered to ask questions and not feel stupid. And also, like, that creates like a really safe learning environment for all of us. But yeah, with that, thank you everyone for attending. We're a little bit past the hour, so thank you to everyone who stayed for us to wrap up these final questions. The recordings for this event and all our past events are posted on the website, and I also dropped the link to our careers page and application in the chat if you're interested. Please submit an application. We hire everyone from people with bachelor's degrees to PhDs for entry-level positions and internships as well. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.